Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Jim. I'm co-founder of 3Pipe Brand Performance Agency. Today, we've teamed up with our friends and partners at digital commerce agency Trizons to showcase some of our work with a shared client, Liberty London. I'm delighted today to be joined by Eric Ferguson, Head of E-commerce at Liberty, who will be chatting about the last 12 months and also some of the future plans that the iconic retailer has in store, or not in store, perhaps. We'll also be chatting to my colleague Mikey Fielden, who is Head of Martech at 3Pipe, and also to Liam Downs, Director of Customer Success at Trizons. We had so many questions come in as part of the webinar registration, and some really good ones too, and we've incorporated as many of those as possible into the Q&A. But if anything else comes to mind while we're chatting, please do use the Q&A function. And actually, Mikey and Liam will be helping to answer some of those questions, and we'll pick out some of those, the better ones at the end, which we haven't run through in the chat. So I'll get straight into it. Welcome, Eric.
Good morning, thank you.
Eric, could you just give us a quick update about your background and your role at Liberty?
Of course, yeah. So Eric Ferguson, I'm the e-commerce director here at Liberty. I've been here for a little over 4 years. My background pre-Liberty was much more consulting. So I started off at a strategy consultancy house called OC&C, and I was there for 6 years. Bit of retail, quite a lot of financial work with private equity. I then moved to Shop Direct. I was quite keen to get some hands-on retail experience. And I worked in Liverpool, working on Varian Littlewoods, introducing new categories to work through a dropship vendor model. I then moved back to consultancy. So I worked for a company called Ecomera, and we helped retailers build their e-commerce platforms, and we ran outsourced e-commerce for them. And then the lure of moving back into retail came, and I was really, I've always loved Liberty, and I was very keen to really help drive growth for them online and through digital channels. So this is where I am.
Great, thank you very much. So I think it's a bit of an understatement to call the last, 2020 a bit of a monumental year for Liberty for lots of reasons. Where do we start? I mean, you had the anniversary, a rebrand, and of course the pandemic hit. I mean, a lot going on last year anyway. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it was, unprecedented is probably the buzzword, most used word of last year, but it was going to be a busy year anyway. As you said, we new branding, new identity. E-commerce was always going to, it was always going to be a big year. We were planning for 40–50% growth, and we were investing in new platforms. So we were looking to support not only that, that redesign, that new brand, but with a new website, a new web build. But we obviously didn't anticipate that being in a year when the store was going to be shut and web was going to be the only channel. So it was a big year. There was lots of technology and lots of projects to deliver, and it came in a period when we were all working from home and demand for our services were greater than ever.
Sure. I mean, you mentioned the re-platform there, and you've moved to a mobile first version of Salesforce Commerce Cloud. Why did you make that decision?
I think there were a number of factors. I think some of it was very user driven. Well, the bulk of it was very user driven. So our prior site was good. It was functioning well, but the design was quite old. It was 5 years old. And by virtue of that, it wasn't with the current times, and it wasn't as crisp and fresh. We've gone through a rebranding activity with Pentagram and had a new identity, which we really wanted to bring to the fore. And so whether we redesigned and rebuilt the site or not, we were going to need to give that brand a new presentation. The site was also on Site Genesis, so the previous incarnation of Codebase for Salesforce Commerce Cloud. And that in itself was getting dated. It was quite slow. It wasn't mobile first. And ultimately, it was going to be decremented. So that technology was going to be replaced and will be replaced in the coming years by Salesforce Commerce Cloud. So we were always going to have to do this. We therefore thought, well, if we're going to have to do it, we're going to be building new functionality and capability on this site, we'd rather do it once, rebuild front end now, and then build on those new functionalities than build on those new functionalities on an existing code base and then rework it again. I think the final piece was by virtue of being 5 years old, the code base needed a bit of a spring clean. So we built it in 2015-16. It added new functionalities, new third-party plugins, new tweaks and changes to designs, and all of that adds just code. And it's kind of, it's a bit like imagining footnote after footnote after footnote. After a while, it just becomes quite hard to audit. So testing took a lot longer, and we would have quite a lot of kind of unintended consequences of an update on one area of code, one area of the site feeding through to elsewhere. So it was about customer, a faster site, fresher site, clean, crisp design, optimized for mobile usage. But there was also a backdrop of this was something we were going to have to do ultimately because that code, because it was going to be a product that wouldn't be supported by Salesforce.
Sure. I mean, and the timing of the decision to take the replatforming, historically, most retailers will do it when they're quiet.
Yeah.
How did that?
Yes, we planned it for May, which is one of our normally it would be our quietest online time. And the store shut in March, and it was shut in April, and it was shut in May. So a business that had been, and for most people is in their minds very much a store-based retailer, it was suddenly 100% online. So that wasn't the plan, right? We did purposely try and pick a quietest time, lowest risk, and with a few months which we could tidy things up before we then go into peak. I mean, that last piece was still true. So by launching in May, we still had a good few months to get everything up and fully finessed by the time activity started ramping up for Christmas. But I mean, it was the stress levels were definitely on my part a little bit higher, and by virtue of the store being shut, everyone was focused on the web, and so we had many more eyes looking at the performance and success of that launch than we would perhaps normally have anticipated.
Of course, and I mean, no one could have predicted what was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But would you have done what you did knowing this was going to happen, if you see what I mean? Knowing that this crazy was going to happen and unfurl, would you have done the same repositioning, the replatforming in the same way at the same time?
I mean, it's kind of history is written by the winners, right? Isn't it? I'd like to say I'm really courageous, and absolutely, because the benefits are even greater because e-commerce was even more important, and so those improvements, the upside was even greater. So that's what I'd like to say. Whether if I've been taken into a room by my peers and said, "You really want to do it now? Why don't we wait a year?" Who knows? But I think we'd done the bulk of the work by the time it got to March. We were in the final rounds of sprints and deployment. It was on track. We do continual change and deployment all the time. So I think I would like to say that we would have considered it hard, but I think we would have still carried on and launched it, if that makes sense.
And there'll be a lot of retailers watching us today that are perhaps thinking about doing what you've done in terms of replatforming. How much extra work is actually involved, and how do you resource that on the client side? So
in a normal year, we would do 8 sprints, so eight deployments of improvement on the website. And I think to rebuild and relaunch the website, we did, 12 sprints. So it was kind of a year and a half's work of work. I mean, my team would laugh at me because the amount of resource in those sprints is much greater than a normal one. But in terms of internal resource, we brought in an additional member to support on the code development and UX design. And our head of digital design focused all his time on it. In terms of project managing it, we used internal existing resource, but they were redeployed to focus on it. And then we worked with Trizent, who provided their project manager. So, I mean, it was definitely incremental resource, but against a backdrop of how we normally operate in terms of 8 deployments over the course of the year. It was certainly more. I would say 50 to 100% more in terms of resource, but it was against a framework of delivery that was familiar and normal. So, we run sprints, we run submissions, we do the testing and the release. It just happened to be that we were dividing one really big project across 12 sprints, as opposed to doing 12 deployments where each one of those might actually have 3 or 4 different things in it.
And how long would that process take, the actual time duration of a re-platform? You talk about 12 sprints, but over what time frame?
We started, I think, in kind of November, December, and we launched in May. So it was kind of a 5-6 month deployment. And that was from kind of requirement gathering through to ultimate deployment, which I think, and as I say, when I worked at Ecomera, to a degree, this is our bread and butter. And I'd say, that's a pretty sharp timeline for the volume of work that we did. I used to helpfully joke to my colleagues that it was a redesign, but it was a full rebuild. It was new code, new reference application from scratch. So it was a sizable piece of work.
And you still achieve that within the timeframes you mentioned, despite the pandemic. That the pandemic didn't elongate that process, or the time.
No, it didn't. And I've spoken to a few people, and other retailers around this, I remain so impressed at how we deployed such a sizable piece of work whilst working from home remotely. Now, when we work with Trizens, their development team are based in Bulgaria, so there's a remote teamwork project or ways of working already. The Liberty team had spent physically some time in Bulgaria working with some of Trizens' development team, building up a rapport and a relationship and ways of working, which I think always helps. But yeah, I mean, it's we really didn't miss a beat, despite the lockdown and people moving to home, and all those memories which might feel a bit distant now, but a year ago, organizing computers into the back of taxis to get them to people's homes so they carry on working on their big screens. And I mean, it sounds really trivial, but it's those are the realities. And most people don't have a home office, so they're adjusting their kitchen or their bedroom to accommodate their new life, which isn't just resting and enjoying home, it's also working at home. But it all went pretty smoothly, and we all learned to adopt to Teams and new comms channels which have been made available but hadn't always been adopted willingly. We suddenly all became converts within the space of a week.
I'm not sure about converts, but au fait. So let's talk about the going into the pandemic and the impact of that on your business.
Mm-hmm.
As you say, the store shuts, you became responsible overnight, literally, for 100% of revenue coming into the company. Where was that revenue coming from? Was it coming from existing customers or from new customers? How do you see the split?
It's been a bit of both. It's I think we saw existing customers shopping more frequently and a higher engagement, unquestionably. And there are certain categories where we really are the only destination. So if you're looking for the most authoritative range of Liberty fabrics, we're the brand and home for that. And if you'd previously bought in store, that was no longer a possibility. So, that engagement of that customer type certainly moved from the closed store to online. But our growth, our acceleration really came from acquisition, and that's by virtue of the statistics we've really seen, which is people have been at home, they haven't been able to shop in store, so their propensity to consume, to purchase online has really rocketed. Liberty is, in the grand scheme of things, in London, in the UK, and the world, is really quite a modest retailer, and so the opportunity for us really was to go out and acquire a proportion, a segment of that intent, of that purchase willingness out there, and so we've acquired a lot, and that has been London, that has been the UK, but it has increasingly become international. So it's a balance, and we maintain a balance because there is a there is a profitability objective, and if you shift too much to acquisition doesn't come for free. So there is a balance you need to pursue.
Because I know that when one of the key purposes of the rebrand and the repositioning and the replatforming was to go after more international growth as well, wasn't it? Which we haven't talked about. But did that come through during the pandemic, or was it more focused on the UK?
It did come through, and it's a good question, because I remember we were looking at it. We saw different phases of growth internationally as well in that first lockdown. So the lockdown from a Western Europe perspective started really in Spain and Italy, and so we saw a drop in demand initially in those markets as they really suffered that first wave of COVID. But we saw a growth in demand from the US, and then as that first wave kind of came through, we saw increase in demand again from China and Hong Kong and the Far East. So we saw a kind of wave in demand that kind of flowed as countries responded to that pandemic. But we, more broadly, much as we did in the UK, we went out and pursued and tried to capture and tried to serve this customer intent across the world, which was surging online. And the reason to be of Liberty, this curation of fine, exquisite products from across the world, this home of the artistic shopper, as Oscar Wilde. It isn't everyone necessarily, but it is everywhere. And so the opportunity for us is really just to find where they are and make them aware of the great assortment that we've provided for them, and they can, and they shop with us. And so our international sales grew very rapidly last year and slightly ahead of our domestic sales, and that's something we're looking to continue to pursue.
I mean, you mentioned some product categories there, and how was it juggling the supply chain, the inventory versus where the demand was, and obviously you had your own range of face masks as well. Yeah. Which categories perform really well? Are they the obvious ones in homeware and home furnishings, or was there any surprises?
I think, all categories perform well by virtue of the trends that we spoke about. But I think unquestionably, beauty, homewares, fabric, all sorts of strong demand. We're all spending more time at home. We were talking before this call started about candles. We saw huge demand in things that people can enjoy at home, either for themselves or as gifts. I think one of the areas I've been a little bit surprised by has been the performance of particularly jewelry and accessories. And they've performed really well online. And we're seeing really strong intent to purchase across our great range, our great assortment, at a range of price points. So it's I think I was a little surprised by that, by that customer intent. But then, it's kind of rationalizing after the event. Jewelry's nice. It's a nice thing to wear. You don't need to have a special occasion to go out and wear it for. And it's a love, and it's a great gift. So I think in some respects it's kind of not a surprise, but it certainly was initially. Whereas, we could completely understand that if you're sat at home 24 hours a day, you might want to spruce it up a bit or have something delightful around. I think the jewelry was a little bit more of a surprise.
So obviously the business has seen a spike in e-com sales. They invested in the new platform and rebrand. Were they always going to be backing it with bigger investment anyway, pre-pandemic, or have the budgets moving forwards increased even more so than you'd have expected on the back of the re-platforming?
I think e-commerce director is always going to say he's the most important thing in a business, right? But it's we had high hopes for e-commerce, and that's always been part of the plan since I've been there in 2017, and it was has been the business plan for a long period of time. And we had good growth pre-pandemic. It is just accelerated, and I think there are lots of statements out there, where 3 or 5 years change in the space of 12 months, but we see real rapid growth. And the business expectation, and certainly my expectation, is that we will continue to see strong growth and we should pursue it. And it kind of relates back to that earlier point. Is that, you know, we're quite a small business in the context of retail. What we do has resonance across the world with lots of customers. We do, you know, we just need to present ourselves to them and make them aware of our great assortment and tailor and improve our digital experience for them. So, you know, I've certainly submitted, you know, budgets that are for the next year and the year after that are ahead of where last year was. You know, I think we see, I think what we've gained over the last year has been great momentum and great sign of intent, and it's kind of the beginning of the next wave, as opposed to an expectation that it will dampen down when store reopens.
It's easy to forget that Liberty has one retail store. There's nothing else in duty frees around the world. There's no other international locations. So, I mean, how much do you sweat the sort of joined up online offline piece, or are you just where does that figure in that planning, the more holistic omnichannel strategy?
I mean, I think it's one of the things that's really driven out of the last year. One of the, I mean, it's been superbly challenging for all sorts of reasons, but I think one of the legacies has been this adoption of digital transformation, which is a whole load of lingo jargon, but it's meant that this business unit, which was quite standalone, it has become the focus because by virtue of the store being shut. And so everyone is interested and considering and making suggestions and recommendations about e-commerce and digital. And we came up with some innovations over the summer. We introduced the services of Hero, so that you can, the customer can chat to one of our in-store sales team live, and that's great for fabric because they can then see digitally what the fabric actually looks like, how the scale of the pattern, the finish, the shine, etc. Or jewelry, they can see the detail of the jewelry, or and so on. So that that is a really tangible engagement of digital and store, a proper omni-channel experience, and has been very successful and has had good participation. And I'm anticipating that we will just pursue more initiatives along these lines. I think it's understanding the relevance of the channel, the experience to the customer in the place. So unlike most businesses, most of our range is normally in the store, and then we will be growing and expanding a range that will be available online. Now we just need to be able to service that to customers in store. So more of that kind of buy in store, fulfill from anywhere. So a bit of a ramble really, but I mean, I think the concept, we were multi-channel, and this is, this was said 10 years ago, we were multi-channel, but we're now much more omni-channel, and there is much more consideration across the functions to support that customer wherever they are, as opposed to serving just the customer who's in front of you.
I think you did a stint in customer service or helping out in the stock room at one point during the pandemic, weren't you, in terms of returns?
Absolutely, picking and packing, fulfilling orders. Yes, exactly. Yeah. I'm encouraging that it becomes part of everyone's training, because it's trying to find a online order in a 6-story mock Tudor building is not always the easiest. So there's a few lessons learned there.
So is it fair to say that COVID has just raised the bar generally for e-commerce businesses?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think in different ways. I think we're at home. It's raised the bar, but it's also changed the dynamic of it, I think. So I don't think it's, take delivery, for example. I don't think it's just about as quick as possible. Now, I know Amazon has normalized that same day or next day with that Prime, and there is that urgency. But I think there is also convenience, and we're at home more. And I think this is one of the reasons why online's grown because shops have been shut, but online's grown because it's also convenient because you're at home, and therefore, as long as you know when the delivery is arriving, you don't mind that you might have to wait a couple of days. So, I mean, people have been making predictions around speed of delivery and importance, for a long period of time, and I'm bound to get it wrong. But I don't think everyone needs to be pursuing necessarily prime. I think it's about being convenient and timely and providing a service that's clear to customers rather than immediate. I think areas where the bar really has raised are, I mean, just in your world, right? I mean, customer acquisition, it's more and more challenging. It's more and more competitive by virtue of the flood of customers going online to consume. We've got a lot of people out there
Tracking issues and all that.
yeah, exactly. Everyone's trying to catch them and attract them, and that's expensive. And then the dynamics behind it are ever changing. So it's so that is that's really interesting and an area that we will continue to pursue and develop, because by virtue of when we were little, this wasn't a big priority, but now we're quite big, and it's an increasing priority. And the consequences of us not getting it quite right become a bit more significant. I think where the bar has also been raised has been kind of on content and engagement. So again, we brought more of our non-digital team into the content and experience last year. So we did, our beauty director spent a whole day doing Q&A on Instagram. We had our buyers doing features and videos on the selections they bought, or how to dress your table for Christmas, and so on. And they get really, really strong engagement. And I think that that bar of kind of relevant two-way engaging content has definitely risen, and I think there's expectation for that to continue. Will grow. We'll be working towards that.
Okay, and just in terms of moving forwards, we touched on international briefly, but obviously, where do you see the growth opportunities coming? And also, from a store perspective, obviously, a lack of international tourists, let's say this year. How do you balance the international ambition with the lack of tourism as well in the UK?
Yeah, I mean, some big questions. So I think our growth will come simply from twofold. One is to continue to try and engage and be relevant to the customers who've tried us for the first time over the last 12 months. That existing base and serving and being relevant to them. And we've got a fantastic loyalty program. We've got really good participation, and we kind of redesigned and improved the relevance and timeliness of that over the last 12 months. And then it's around acquisition, and that's both domestic, because we're still quite small in the context of the UK, but it is international, and we've got slightly different stories to different customers in different markets. And people talk about personalization, and we're not necessarily personalizing to one, but it's about identifying what is relevant to a customer group or prospective customer group in different markets. And international, you're right. I think it's unlikely that we're going to get a flood of tourists back this year. So for us, it's about trying to present the offer that we have to that customer in the markets that they have. And again, that loyalty program has been a useful means for us to communicate to them, and the supporting CRM schemes behind it, just as I suspect many businesses have done. It's not perfect, right? Some people do just like a store and love that store, and we can't wait for them to come back and welcome them in the months to come.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens on the 12th. Domestically, I'm naturally a huge optimist, and I think we'll see a lot of people coming out and going shopping, because it's something we haven't been able to do for a long period of time, and it's a great treat. It's a great delight. It's it will be as good as it's ever been to wander around the store and to wander around the West End. But that's I can rationalize that hope and expectation, but it's a hope and expectation until it happens. So it'll be interesting to see what comes.
Yeah. You mentioned your retention strategies and the loyalty program, and I guess with the backdrop of the Google tracking issues that are coming into play, there seems to be a lot of refocus back on retention and loyalty. Is that something you're conscious of, and is that a reason for it? Is it purely because you've just built up this new acquisition pool of people, and you need to retain them over the next sort of It's a shifting period.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think it's a mix of things. I think it's to grow. We have ambition. We've grown really rapidly, and we were growing really rapidly pre-COVID. And by virtue, that means you do have to go out and acquire, and that is more expensive than you're using your free or own channels. But I think by virtue of us getting bigger and bigger, the numbers get bigger and bigger. So, what might be thousands when you're quite small in terms of acquisition, in terms of spend, that number can grow quite significantly as you grow. And so it rightly becomes under scrutiny because it becomes a larger priority in your cost base, I guess. Your existing customers are where from a mechanical sense, are where the profit comes from, right? So, because if you don't have to do that paid search or that affiliate point of acquisition, you get that second, third, fourth, fifth transaction from them. You're capturing more of the gross margin of their transaction through to your bottom line. So, for your long-term profitability of a business, it's all about existing, and for me, that is about CRM and loyalty and being relevant, but it's also about ensuring our delivery on promise is really strong. So people make that first transaction because of what you've shown them is beautiful and engaging and resonate, but they don't know that for sure until it arrives on their doorstep and they have it and it matches their expectation. And if you've failed or not quite fulfilled, either because the delivery is late or the packaging is not very good, or the imagery didn't reflect what was on the website, you're not going to get a second transaction. And it's all about trying to get that second transaction, because the more transactions customers make, the greater the likelihood they make subsequent ones. So I mean, it's a bit of a ramble, but I mean, I think we've gone out and we've recruited lots more customers than we anticipated last year, which is fantastic. That is a huge opportunity for us, and if we can retain them in the way that we have done in the past, we've got a really good bedrock for growth.
Great, thank you. I've noticed that we've got a very shy audience that have asked no questions, which is very unusual. So perhaps we're covering off all their questions. You never know. But I'm going to bring in Liam and Mikey now, who were the partners that helped make all this happen with Eric and his team. I'll start with Liam, who's Director of Customer Success at Trizons, and then we'll come to Mikey. Liam, could you just give us a quick introduction of who you are and what you do at Trizons?
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Jim. So I guess my background's not too similar to Eric's, actually. So all client side, spent some time at Shop Direct as well. I think we just missed each other in our timings at Shop Direct. I did a good stint, kind of 7-8 years with L'Oreal and The Body Shop, and then more recently did a couple of years with Hush Homeware, so British women's fashion retailer, working to kind of trying to grow the business and primarily working on a re-platform project to SFRA with Salesforce. So lots of experience in this area, lots of experience leading digital teams, and now working with Trizons to support all of our customers to hit all of these growth numbers as Eric's just been running through, which in pretty much every case pre-COVID were big growth numbers. Everyone's looking to grow their e-commerce business, and what the pandemic's really brought is additional growth. But I think what we've all going to have coming down the line as digital leaders is we're not going to be able to kind of sit back on our laurels and say, well, we're going to have a downturn next year because the pandemic's coming away or going away. Everyone's going to be asked to continue that growth for e-com. So supporting all of our customers in hitting those numbers, finding the right ways to deliver that growth, and ultimately for us to be a true partner with those customers as well in delivering that.
Great. Mikey, what do you do at 3Pipe?
So I'm head of marketing technology at 3Pipe. So I have actually been at 3Pipe for 8 years through 2 brand names and 3 offices, I think. So fairly different to Eric and Liam. I'm advertising through and through. But within the 3Pipe sphere, my real focus is on the tech and the analytics side of things, and I lead the team there. really championing what data and tech can do for our clients and our customers, and making sure that it's a benefit rather than like something that, oh no, the tech hasn't worked, and really supporting clients in getting the most out of their data,
Okay.
in a nutshell.
While I've got you, I'll start with some questions for you, and then we'll come on to Liam. Why do you need an analytics partner as part of a replatforming? And what will
Yeah, so it's a good question, because ultimately a lot of clients don't have an analytics partner during a replatforming. But for data-driven organizations, it's such a risk. From our standpoint, being an analytics partner is all about making sure that you get what you need from the analytics, but data integrity remains strong. With analytics and data flowing into different platforms, you don't get a second chance at it. So it's if you've messed up your Google Analytics and you're making decisions on that this year and your year-on-year stats, if you've got it not working for a few days, that's a really big problem, and it needs to be right, and it needs to not have those issues. So the analytics partner in this whole business is a really deeply focused partner on on making sure those numbers remain strong and remain credible. Because what you can't have is anyone losing faith in your analytics numbers if it's the source of truth that you're running your data-driven business off, which is like the case for Liberty, which is a hugely data-focused organization. And when you're, in Liberty's case, making big plans on acquisition based off a lot of the numbers that we're supplying, they have to be right, and and that's what we do in replatforming.
I think Eric wants to say something.
No, absolutely. Look, it's I've by virtue of my time at Ecomera, worked on a good number of replatforms, 30 odd, 40 odd sites over the space of time, and it's not easy. It's not easy to port over analytics, and it's something that you tend to only spot where you've got it wrong. And as you know, Mikey said, you can't upload into Google Analytics the missing data or the stuff that you didn't capture a customer clicking on. So you kind of live with it. So it was really important, you know, for me in the business to make sure that we got this right. And it was a more complicated side as well, because we spun out a US subfolder domain as well, which meant that we had extra things that needed to be tagged and then to be separated out in certain reporting and then to be brought back in another reporting. So it was, you know, it was very successful, and it's easy to gloss over what went well because you think, well, it went well, it can't have been difficult. But I'm well aware that this stuff often goes wrong, and it often takes a day or two before you spotted that it's gone wrong, and then you're stuck with it. So it was.
No, I'm not going to ask what went wrong. Hopefully not too much. What were the specific challenges in this? I mean, you've mentioned a couple of things there, but were they the bigger challenges on this particular analytics player, Mikey?
For us with Liberty, you've already got a mature data ecosystem. And so there's a lot going on. You've got two different forms of checkout with the international and the UK based. So you've got a lot of balls in the air to make sure they keep like landing and hitting everything correctly. The other side, like in any replatforming, is always making sure that everybody's on the same page and the communication is flawless. And this is something that it should have been a challenge, but it really wasn't with this replatforming, because as Eric was saying, we already had that way of working. It was 12 very big sprints rather than in the exact same format that we had we normally have 8 sprints, and we've all been working together for years. And so there was complete anticipation and trust in each other to each fulfill like our part of the bargain, and really that delivered completely. So there was never in any stage a breakdown of communication, but normally that would be a challenge. But like again, because of the format, that really wasn't.
Just had a specific question on analytics come in from Sophia about best practices and how did we test the work during the replatform?
So the best practice with analytics, we have a full sprint checklist, and we check on multiple browsers as well as specifics of the sprint. So we effectively did our normal sprint checklist, which we do. Like it's good to be said, we do this on every sprint, regardless of if it should have an analytics change or not, because you never know when there's going to be an unintended consequence. So we went through our full sprint checklist across all of the replatforming in every data layer and for every tag. So that's really where that is at. Liberty also have, through Liberty and Trizones working very well together, have a very formalized development, staging, and production environments, which are all complete mirrors of each other. So that there's nothing that doesn't work in only works in production. So you can test everything in staging, and you can start testing in development, which means that by the time it's in production, the production checks, like very, very rarely will anything ever be flagged in a production check. It will always be in staging, and so that there's no issues get pushed to production.
Okay. And your key takeaways and whether your approach would change if you did it all again?
Key takeaways, if I was to do this with somebody else, I would probably try and copy what we did in terms of the communication aspects. Doing it again, we're in a slightly different world in analytics now. So when we did the project, it was all about enhanced e-commerce, getting all the benefits from that. And now it's and universal analytics in terms of Google Analytics. Now that's still really important for all your historical data, but you've got GA4 coming in, and that has different data structures. And so if I was to do it again, I would, the scope of how we would arrange things would be slightly different, so that we could incorporate both GA4 and universal analytics at the same time and have parity between them, as well as parity between the old and the new. So just putting more balls in there, probably.
Okay, thank you. Lee, I'm going to come to you, but before asking your pre-agreed questions, we've got a couple of more interesting ones that come in on the Q&A. So I'll start with, there's a couple here from Ash. Were there any compromises that we had to make through the 12 sprints? And what percentage of the rebuild was custom versus out-of-the-box functionality? Maybe Eric could help as well.
Yeah, I'll defer to Eric on that one for the first one. I think Eric's probably going to give a broader answer than me, and I can add to it.
So there were two parts, right? So how much was custom? I think quite a lot was custom. In terms of, the wireframe templates you get on SFRA are perfectly sufficient to give you a working shop. But we're every retailer, everyone wants to think they're complicated, but we are quite complicated. We've got a massive catalog, we've got a loyalty program, we serve multiple countries, we have an integration with a third-party tool called Globally that helps surface different pricing and availability and rules to customers in different markets. These things start layering on. We have guest and existing customer checkout, we have PayPal as well as CyberSource, and we now have Apple. So things that feel very simple isn't it just a product catalog and a price and a checkout, suddenly become really quite complicated. Added to that, we sell beautiful, amazing product that we want to showcase with, gorgeous, stunning, detailed photography, and that warrants and benefits different templates. So, there was a lot of custom work. I wouldn't hazard a percentage, but it was, most of the templates would have had some adjustments to it, some form or other. And then the earlier question was reworks.
Yeah, any compromises that you had to make through the 12 sprints?
Honestly, yeah. There are a few things that we would have wanted to get live and that we decided to bump back a month and mop up in a period of hypercare. But nothing, by virtue of the fact that we're happy to do that, nothing groundbreaking or disappointing. And it's a tricky one because on the one hand, want to be very demanding of your partners and get everything that you dreamed and wished for and everyone else dreamed and wished for by a given date. But if you're too unrelenting and you don't work together, you're destined to failure is too grand. But I mean, it won't work. There are and so acknowledging that, and it sounds simple, but deadlines are, it's useful to agree what you can all join together and deliver to a good standard reliably and deliver it, than to try and bolt in some extra things. And I'm always going to be, and I know I'm a complete hypocrite on this, because I will say to my dev team on the one hand that, yeah, it's absolutely fine. This is the number of hours in this sprint and this is what we'll deploy. And then, the day before the sprint closes, I'll come up with 3 extra things I'll be asking them to squeeze in. So but that discipline does have to persist, because otherwise, the framework does, fall down, and your risk of failure is much greater.
Liam?
Yeah, I think just add a couple of points onto that. I think SFRA in Salesforce is a fantastic product, but pretty much everyone will customize it. It's just how far you're going to push that customization. And as Eric says, for a brand like Liberty, it requires customization, because what do you want to achieve with it from a brand perspective? So from a design build, from an experience perspective and third-party integrations, we did have to do a level of customization to get everything that we wanted as a group to get into play, to deliver something that was brilliant for customers. And I think, Eric touched on it there. I think that partnership and the balance that we have between client and agency is for Eric to push us and to try and squeeze as much as he possibly can out of us as an agency team, but for us also to be, I guess, strong, push back onto Eric to say, look, this is what we can deliver on time at the highest quality possible. And I think it's that relationship that works really well between us and the Liberty team, to be able to get to a point where we're delivering or delivered as much as we possibly could in that first launch on time, to the right quality, and then to have the running sprint plan beyond that, to release all of the enhancements as quickly as possible.
Okay. I want to pick up another question from Ash. When you decided to re-platform, was it a given that you would naturally upgrade to Salesforce, or was there an RFP when other platforms were considered?
Well, that's an interesting question. So we already were on Salesforce. We were on SiteGen, so their previous incarnation, and so we didn't issue an RFP, but we definitely reviewed the options in the marketplace that were suitable for us. But we came to the conclusion pretty swiftly that staying with Salesforce was, the right solution for us. Mix of benefits. One is, we had internal expertise on the code and development. We do some internal development as well as, draw on Triton's expertise. So there's an advantage of being able to continue to leverage that expertise. And more broadly, I think, from my perspective, it is the most technology for a digital retailer of our size and scale. It's cloud hosted. It's scalable. There are good technology partnerships out there. Pace of deployment improvements changes are pretty swift, pretty easy to manage. And having worked on total cost of ownership models in relatively recent times, again, when I say at eComera, it was the best suited for our needs. And as a consequence, we didn't go out and issue an RFP, but we did a good audit of the marketplace.
A question from Azim. Are you happy with the speed of the website on Salesforce?
No one's ever happy with the speed of a website, is the honest answer, is it? Right? You always want to be faster. So, I think that's the honest answer. We're always going to be working to make it faster, but it was faster than the previous incarnate. So, but it will never be fast enough.
Liam, coming back to you, have you seen other big digital projects now coming through on the back of, as a priority on the back of COVID? How good is Trizen's pipeline at the moment?
It's good actually, and it's great to see. I think going into kind of lockdown and pandemic taking full effect, I don't think anyone really knew what was going to happen. I think we certainly planned for the worst in terms of what could happen, and we were definitely positively surprised in terms of how our customers fared during the period. So what we've definitely seen is that growth in the need to escalate digital roadmaps, and having been sat on the other side of the table and speaking to people within my network, the projects that have been on the table for maybe 10 years and haven't kind of been given the light of day are now top priority and needing to be done in the next 3 months. So there's and I'm sure everyone's experienced scenarios like that. So, and we're certainly seeing that with our customers, that from and again, in most cases, certainly for our retail clients that had store estates, it was the second child of the family in most cases, and now kind of being kind of number one child, and a lot more focus, more budget, but greater intensity in terms of the pace that they need to grow and supplement the gap with the retail businesses mostly being closed. So we are definitely seeing our pipeline grow, and we have seen that grow right the way through pandemic, and we're looking for that to grow through next year. And like I said at the start, I think what we're certainly seeing is that for all of our customers that have seen fairly substantial growth period, they're not having conversations to say, well, we're gonna drop, and we're going to have a period of kind of flatlining next year. It's we grow again and we grow again. So what we're really doing is planning and working with all of our customers to make sure that they have the right roadmap in place for this year and beyond, and to deliver on those growth figures.
I want to squeeze in a couple more questions before we wrap up, both from Sean. What steps did we take to mitigate the effect of organic traffic that the replatform we might have had, or the drop off in organic traffic?
Who's going to answer that one?
I wonder if that's one for you, Eric.
Yeah, I thought so. A major concern, I think it's pretty common for replatforms to coincide with a drop in organic traffic. We prepared for it by budgeting for more paid search activity, which on the whole we didn't need to deploy, which was good, but we had at least prepared for it. I think we worked closely with our SEO agency and took their guidance and help with the rebuild and the remappings and in the same way when we launched and we had a program of works for our digital analytics, we made sure we had a program of works to ensure that we republished sitemaps, etc. We had detailed checklists that we worked through, and then we monitored. And we monitored for a while, because you don't always see an immediate negative impact. You can ask Google to recrawl or re-index your website, but sometimes things can take a little while to feed through. And it all feels simple, but there are complexities by virtue of having one domain, but the ability to pay in different prices and publishing and targeting different markets for different kind of activities. There were also complexities we had to work through to make sure that we were indexing, the right subfolder and prices in the right markets. So, I basically the same top tips: identify your partner, work on a checklist, prepare in advance, and equally prepare for, prepare for disappointment, so that if it doesn't quite work out as intended, you can boost it back up again. But it was, touchwood, pretty successful on that front.
Okay, it's now time for some brutal honesty. Sean demands an answer. What went wrong It can't all have gone right.
We had about an hour where our payment partner wasn't plugged in. That was quite stressful.
Yeah.
So a beautiful website that you couldn't transact on.
Quite helpful.
Yeah. So so I mean that was, and it was the only store, and it was a big relaunch, and everyone was looking at it. So that was, that was a fail. I think otherwise, on the whole, it was all pretty good. There were things we agreed that we had to bump out, and it would have been nice to have got everything in on time. But they were, pretty small things, and we knew that there was a reasonable chance that some things would move to subsequent sprints. But I think that was the one I remember.
Yeah, pretty sure the agency's got nothing wrong.
Yeah. Faultless. Yeah.
So a question for you specifically, Liam. What's your view on Shoplift versus Salesforce?
Versus Shoplift or Shopify?
Shoplift versus Salesforce is the question.
I'm not familiar with Shoplift.
We have no view on that. So we'll have to come back to you on that, Azim.
Yeah, I'll come back to you on that one.
Yeah. So we've got like literally a few minutes left if anyone wants to ask a question, but my questions for you guys were, what are the valuable lessons you've learned as part of this process? And we'll start with you, Liam, and Mikey, then Eric.
I think the running theme that I guess tied everything together was the partnership between all participants in the project, and I think Eric touched on this at the very start. It was the planning that went into the project is what carried us through the changing situation with the pandemic. So I think what we'd really take out of that is how we approach partnership as an agency is something that kind of is a running theme, both with our clients and third parties like you guys, to make sure that we're all kind of running in the same direction to deliver something. I think what it's really taught us as a business is that we're able to work remotely on pretty much any project now, and it's certainly worked well in many ways for us, and that's something we'll take forward. But it really is that it's the communication and the partnership that runs through every project that really ensures that it's delivered on time, to scope, to quality.
Mikey?
I was going to say the organisation and the communication, echoing a lot of Liam's points. It's so often that you get involved in replatforming the day after it's gone live, and everything and that analytics isn't working, whereas it should have been the months beforehand, like with Liberty, and it really was. There was a kind of a summit meeting, I remember, at Trizons, where you had the Trizons on the development side, us from the analytics, the SEO, and then the marketing and e-com departments from Liberty. So in that room, you had everybody who had really a very vested interest in this working, and that was happening months before the replatforming. So that there was no last minute anything. It was all like organized, and so it could be delivered, and it could be the quality that we all want to deliver in the work we do every day.
Eric, one question from Sophia has just come through about the challenges of acquisition in China versus USA, before we ask you if you're rounding up.
So we don't do much in China, I think, is the honest truth. So the challenges of acquisition in China are ones for us to fully encounter. In the USA, well, I mean, you could fill an hour in itself, but it is trying to work out whether you are you pursuing acquisition through the products you sell and targeting traffic for those, or are you targeting customers already aware of Liberty, and then where do you start? And which is true with any country, but particularly really large countries like the US and China, you've got hundreds of millions or billions of people. Probably makes sense to try and identify a persona or a customer target that you can pursue. But probably a topic for another day. But you know, something we're getting going with, and something we're learning on all the time. And data, you know, data really helps, and digital marketing and data really help because you can be really responsive and you can spot quite quickly, you know, particularly on things like affiliates and paid social and paid search, whether you're getting, you know, whether your activities are performing or not. So data capture reporting really important. I haven't got much to add over what Liam and Mikey said. I mean, I think, you know, planning is obviously really important. We did a lot of it. I think the only piece related, you know, on top of that is being nimble and agile. So again, they're overused words, but just because you plan really well doesn't mean you shouldn't consider review and change that plan as facts change, or as, you know, things that you thought might be easy prove to be difficult, or vice versa. So I think, you know, I would try and keep to that maxim, and then it's about those good comms and the weekly and daily stand-up meetings, and you see how progress is coming, and you get that rapport and trust going, and then you have a better comfort on how hard to push on and how not, you know, and when enough is enough, and when you move things to subsequent sprints or deployments. But you know, detailed planning, but keep flexible.
Great, thank you. Liam, I'm going to put you in touch with Azim after this call. He's come back in.
Yeah, I've just seen it, Shopify Plus.
Yeah.
Shoplift.
Watch out for the shoplifters. So I just like to say thank you so much to Liam, Mikey, and Eric for your time this morning. Thank you to everyone for attending the webinar. And if there are any questions that you'd like to ask post-webinar, just do get in touch with us, and we'll fill those for you, no problem at all. But we'll be making the recording available in the next day or so, and we'll email you a link to that. But thanks again, and have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks all. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.